I think of Dynasty Warriors, I think of a handful of things. Fast-paced, action combat, where you fight hundreds or thousands of enemies at once while heavy metal is playing in the background. Big, huge, legendary characters, and also the romance of the Three Kingdoms storyline. It's been a long time since I've played a Dynasty Warriors game, and with the upcoming Dynasty Warriors Origins coming out, they've released a demo. So, based on the demo, here are some of my thoughts and criticisms of really just the one level that I played. Obviously, things are subject to change. I never did play Dynasty Warriors 9, though I've heard many a terrible thing about that game. The last Dynasty Warriors game that I played was 8 Extreme Legends, and it has been a while since I've played that one. Just based off of the demo, I'm going to talk about some of the pros and cons for some of the changes that they have made, and I believe that for the demo, they have added in some things to the level in particular that you probably won't get until later in the game. I'm thinking in particular of the Lu Bu fight. I don't know if Lu Bu is supposed to be here. I believe that people on Reddit have been saying that they added him into the demo so that you can get a taste for how boss fights will work. So like I said, things are subject to change. But here are some pros and cons, things that I like and dislike about just the mechanics of what I have seen so far in the demo of Dynasty Warriors Origins. The pros: it is a new game, but it still feels familiar. It has the massive scale combat, the relatively large levels with hundreds of enemies to fight in them. The graphics are pretty decent for this type of game, and the music is really good, as always. However, in the actual combat itself, there have been some changes that have been made. Now, if these things were in Dynasty Warriors 9, then you can correct me in the comments because I didn't play it, but it seems to me like they are taking some elements from Souls-like games and kind of adding them here. And I am not going to call this a Souls-like because it's not that at all. But in terms of combat, you have things like a posture bar now, or Poise, or whatever it's called. You have counterattacking with like parries, you have dodges, you have breaking posture in order to get a really big critical hit in. Stuff like that. The boss fights have become less about just going in and whacking enemies with your weapon and more along the lines of a Elden Ring or Souls type boss fight. They have a move set. You need to learn the move set. Also, if you want to heal, you got to hit a button now instead of actually like going around and finding healing. In the previous games, if you needed health, you would go around and find pots and smash them, which is a thing here as well. That would drop healing items, and then you would just walk into them and it would heal you. Here, you actually pick them up as if they're like a vial or whatever, or a flask, and you just use them when you need them. So that's added in. There isn't a bonfire system or grace system or anything. There is a checkpoint system, so if you fail, you can actually go back to different checkpoints within the battle itself, and you can choose where in the battle you want to go, so that maybe you want to make a different decision here, as opposed to whatever it is that got you in trouble in the first place. Or you can just restart the whole level, whatever you want to do. And I think this is a pretty cool addition because the battles getting up to the final part can be 10 to 15 minutes. And so they don't really want you to waste that much time getting maybe to the boss fight or getting back to the point where you failed. So they let you just reload at different points in the battle. So that way, instead of doing 10 to 15 minutes, you might just have to do 2 or 3. I found that this game was a lot more difficult than a normal Dynasty Warriors game, and I played just on normal. Lu Bu kicked my butt many, many times, and then when I finally beat him, it was awesome. I found that I lost this level quite a few times for different reasons we'll go into later, but mostly because the main general, who is the one leading the entire battle here, he gets defeated. And we'll talk about that later, but that is an instant fail. One of the things that is really cool is that you have more control over your actual troops this time around. You can have them do volleys of arrows into certain areas. You can have them line up for a charge to go forward into a certain area. You even have them be able to like circle an area and then hit anything that's inside of it as like a guarding attack. It's pretty cool. There's some stuff that suggests that maybe down the line you can even change out those formations for different ones, almost like as if they were items or something along the lines, but that wasn't really there in the demo. You have 1v1 duels now, where you could be in the middle of a fight, an enemy lieutenant or general or whoever can come out, challenge you to a duel. You can accept them, and in the middle of the battle, a ring of soldiers will form, and you and the other officer will go 1-to-1 against each other, and whoever has the most hits at the end of the time ends up winning. I believe that there were 4 weapons, maybe 5, but I believe at least 4 in the demo. There's a straight sword, a crescent blade, Guan Yu style. There's a Xiahou Dun sort of, I guess, gigantic scimitar, and then you have the chakra rings that you can use. Each one of the weapons all felt pretty good to use, but then on top of that, they also have their own abilities as well. So you have, if you're playing on Xbox controller, you can hold down your right bumper, and then you can hit X, Y, B, or A, and each one of those is like a special move. You have a new meter now that basically builds up over time as you do basic attacks and heavy attacks. And so some of the things that are familiar here is that basic attacks and heavy attacks, like light and heavy, you can do the combos where you can intermingle them together and stuff like that, just like in the old games. But you also have the ability now to build up a special meter as that goes in, and it becomes a resource, and when you use your weapon's special abilities, it'll actually drain that resource down. So if you hold right bumper X or right bumper Y, you will do a sort of special attack that your weapon has, and each one is different. If you hit right bumper B, you'll do this like weird like palm heel strike into the enemy that if they are doing a special attack and you hit them at the right time, so it becomes a timing thing, you'll do a massive stun to them. You also have right bumper A, which is a sort of type of dodge that I've never gotten to really work too well because the basic dodge is also just as good, so I don't really know what's going on with that. And it seems like they've added in quite a lot of build variety that you can have in terms of different items and the stats that those items give. And in the demo, you could swap between weapons on the fly. So you could like pause the game and equip a new weapon and you would have the weapon. However, all the weapons in the demo did the same amount of damage no matter what. So it really came down to your own preference of what you wanted to use. I'm sure that'll change in the main game, but in the demo, that's just how it worked. Another thing that this game has going for it in terms of like the Soulsy element is that the main bosses have posture bars or poise meters, or I think posture meters, whatever it is, kind of Sekiro style, but like you can physically see them. So they have little shields indicating armor resistance essentially. And as you do damage to them, it does damage to the shield and it'll break those shields. And once you've broken all the shields, they will be stunned and open for a really big, like heavy critical hit. And so when you're fighting people, you're really trying to break their posture or their poise or whichever one it is, and then do the big special attacks. And that's pretty much how you beat Lu Bu as well. So here's some of the cons. So some of the old problems that have been from the previous games have also been brought forward here. One of those problems is that the game expects you to be everywhere at once. So at least in the demo, they have a whole cutscene where you're at a war table, they're discussing the strategy, where you are, what you're supposed to do, what everybody else is supposed to do. And then when the game actually starts, it throws all that out the window. Because for me, when I played the first time through, the footage you'll be seeing is from the second time through, but when I played the first time through, they put me all the way on the right-hand side of the map and expected me to go up the right-hand side of the map. And then about 2 minutes into it, the main general decides, hey, I'm an idiot because the AI is not very good for the general. This is another issue, by the way. The AI for your own friendlies is not very good. The general says, I'm getting killed. Help me, please. So you have to abandon your entire plan to go and help your other officers. And so what ends up happening is that in order to try and keep them from dying, you are just running back and forth along the battlefield at all times, trying to keep them alive. It's kind of annoying. It's the same annoyance that has always been in Dynasty Warriors, because the AI is not very good at keeping themselves alive. And the worst part is that the main general who's leading the whole thing, if he dies, you'll lose the entire thing, and you have to start back from another checkpoint. He can die within the first 5 minutes of the fight. And the worst part is he has a whole retinue of officers and generals that are literally there with him. And it turns out the only person who can keep him alive is me. Like, that's something that I wish that they could get better at doing, but they just never have. So what it does is it kind of wastes that whole scene where we're sitting at the table doing the planning. The tutorial has a lot that's left to be desired. The camera is also not that great. So it is obviously a third-person camera. It is actually kind of low in my opinion, but what'll happen is it does the typical third-person camera thing where if you're near a wall or a tree or anything of that nature, it'll push into the character itself and it'll make your visibility next to nothing. And in a game where you really have to be able to see when someone's attacking you, getting pushed against the wall and not being able to see what's going on is an absolute annoyance. And it's also something that happens when you are in those 1v1 duels, because if you back up at all, your camera is going to get stuck on the circle of soldiers that are around you and push into you and block your vision. However, there are also times where the camera will zoom out really far. And honestly, I think they should let me have that as an option for my camera, just as the default, because I found that when the camera was up that high, maybe even just a little bit more zoomed in, it was really nice. And it let me see a lot more of the battlefield. It let me see a lot more of where the enemies are. And it even let me see some of the boss's stuff a little bit more too. And by boss, I just mean enemy lieutenants or enemy officers, because they kind of treat every single one of them like that. The only real true boss of this level is Lu Bu at the end. But more on the camera, I also wish that the rotation rate for the lock-on was a little bit faster, because you can lock on to other officers and Lu Bu, but if they go flying past you or something like that, the camera's pretty slow to rotate and you really have to kind of manually control it to do it. It's kind of a nuisance in that. Maybe that's something I can change in the settings. Another thing is that I wish that they would stop taking control of the camera away from me when I'm in the middle of fighting people, especially when I'm in the middle of fighting people. So for instance, something might happen on the battlefield. Maybe an enemy shows up, or maybe like a wall gets broken, or let's just say along those lines. The game will take control of the camera, take it off of your character, and show specifically what is happening and where this thing is happening. And I get it. I get that they want you to pay attention to this thing, but it sucks when you're in the middle of a fight and it takes control away from you and you're fighting an officer of some kind, and then the camera comes back and you're taking hits because it took control of the camera away from you. It's kind of annoying. Overall, the performance for me was not that great. It started out fine, but then as the game progressed, it got worse and worse and worse, which to me indicates there's some sort of a leak or some sort of an issue there. And the reason that I say this is because, like I said, it started out fine, but by the time I got to Lu Bu, my game was like freezing and hitching and lagging really bad, to the point where it made Lu Bu a much harder boss than what he should have been.
Let's get started.
Mostly because I would hitch for like a second or two and then I'd be dead when I got control again. I was able to mitigate a lot of the performance issues by turning off VSync and also running the game in DX11 mode, but even then I still had some hitching every now and again. DLSS is not listed in the options, which I believe it is sorely needed. There is FSR, but I do not have an AMD card, and so I was not able to access FSR or the frame generation that comes with it. And that's something that I really would have liked to have had, so I'm hoping that DLSS shows up on launch. I also would have liked to have played as a named character, like Guan Yu or somebody like that, but instead we're kind of forced to play just like a generic no-name, which to me indicates that hopefully there's going to be some sort of character creator or something along those lines, which would be pretty cool. But as of now, it just doesn't really make sense as to why someone like Guan Yu would be below me, why I would even be in control of Guan Yu, why I would be his quote superior officer when I'm a no-name. They don't even give me a name, it's just like wandering something something. And you can play as your lieutenant, Guan Yu, Zhao Hudun, whoever you have equipped, but it's really only for a certain amount of time. But that's pretty much it. I think really for me the biggest issues for this game come down to the camera not being that great. And like I said, I wish the camera were up a little bit higher, because when you're on the field of battle with hundreds of people surrounding you, having the camera right down as low as it is does not make for a very good visual element when it comes to actually trying to see what the enemy is doing, especially if you're fighting an officer of some kind and you're trying to block things or whatever. But having the camera up just a little bit really just makes it a lot better. And then on top of that, you have performance issues. If there's DLSS and Frame Gen at launch for NVIDIA cards, then those issues that I have are completely gone. Like that's all there is to it. But yeah, in terms of the actual game itself, I had a really good time playing the demo. I can't wait for the full release. I really hope the full release is as good, if not better, than what I just played. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you all next time. Signing out.